Okay, everybody, welcome back to the Hard Sell with me, your host, Joel Stevenson. And on the Hard Sell, we recognize that selling is hard. So we're trying to bring the leading experts in sales right to you so you can learn more from them and achieve better results. And today we've got a great guest, Robert Knop of Assist You Today. And Robert has a really interesting background. He started off on the marketing side and sort of worked his way up to be a senior marketing executive in some very large financial services firms. Did that for a period and then has started a company called Assist You Today, where Robert and the team work with all sorts of companies to define B2B and B2C selling strategies that work, particularly leveraging social media, but not exclusively related to that. And he's done a lot of great work with a lot of great companies. So really thrilled to have him today. And Robert, welcome to the show.
Hey, Joel, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Excited to talk to some folks about how to use digital tools, including social media, to build their businesses from a marketing sales perspective.
Yeah, it's great. I think it'll be a fun conversation. Now, I think you and I originally met at a LinkedIn sales executive conference, if I'm remembering. This is quite a number of years ago. And, LinkedIn, as a lot of social platforms are, they're sort of constantly changing and evolving. And I'm curious, as someone that's sort of a keen observer of that market, like maybe to sort of start by maybe talking about how you've seen LinkedIn change maybe over the last few years in terms of, what's working and what's not working, maybe how people use the platform, then maybe have some follow-up from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, as you know, the explosion of video in the last few years has been big. So if you looked at LinkedIn, 3-4 years ago, there was no video content on LinkedIn. But now, I'd say probably about 20-25% of the content on LinkedIn is now video. So, and LinkedIn's algorithm tends to favor video over, text plus image and text plus links, for example. So, video might be something you want to explore from a content perspective. And speaking of content, the content that does the best from that algorithm's perspective. And again, this changes all the time. But right now, text only as well, which I think floors a lot of people. So those long posts that you see that are all text, and you're like, why would someone write all this in a news feed? It's like, well, the reason why is those tend to get seen by the most eyeballs and get the most engagement. So from a content perspective, those are some changes that have happened in the last couple years. And just overall, though, I would say with LinkedIn's really about networking. It's a 24/7 networking channel. And for folks that are scared to get involved with LinkedIn, I know people that still say, I wouldn't know what to say, or I don't know how to use LinkedIn. I mean, to me, you just use it like you would any networking event. You go, you talk to people, you engage with others, you connect with people, just those same traits that have made sales reps so successful for 20, 30, 40 years, building those strong relationships. It's doing the same thing now. So it's not reinventing the wheel, it's just moving the racetrack and building those relationships, but now doing it online.
Yep. Yeah. I find the methods by which people are connecting on LinkedIn may be a little bit different too, versus the early days. I think you could sort of just blast something out to everybody and it was sort of a novel thing and people would accept it. But just using myself as an example, I would say my in-mail box is a bit of a dumpster fire at the moment. And it's a little, and I get a lot of connection requests. It's maybe a little bit hard to parse through them all at some point. So and this happens, I would say it's not just unique to LinkedIn, but like any channel where you're trying to reach people as it gets more popular, usually you get some diminishing returns, like the signal to noise ratio starts to go down a little bit. What do you see people doing successfully to cut through some of that clutter if you are trying to use it as a networking tool and actually like legitimately connect with some people?
Yeah, man, I think warm them up a little bit before you reach out. So if they're, say, Joel, if you're distributing content on a regular basis, I would look at your profile and I would find out 2 or 3 key things on your profile about you. And I'd look at your content. I'd engage with a couple of those pieces of content. So then when I reach out with an invitation to connect, it's not the first time you've ever seen me. It's like, oh, this is a guy who engages with my content. And then those things I've found on your profile, I would mention those in the invite. like you and I know you're from Boston. I think that was the last time we met, as we had coffee in Boston a few years ago. So I'd reference that conversation, or if we met at a conference, or, say if we both worked in financial services, or both lived in Michigan, or both graduated from the same college. Those types of things are great icebreakers, to introduce yourself and find those commonalities and cut through, that noise, where, to your point, with yourself as being, CEO is the title of the company. There's a lot of bots out there that people just set up, to send every CEO in this industry this invite, and they'll send out 50 a day, and it just keeps going and going and going. And I get those too, and so those are pretty easy to spot nowadays. And it's what the typical language will say is like, "I'm really impressed with what you've accomplished at X company," and sometimes they don't even put the name in there; it just says name in brackets. So it's tough. It's not like it was probably 3 or 4 years ago, where you can really expect only humans to reach out. So you got to do a little extra work, but that would be my recommendations: is, find those commonalities and warm people up a little bit before you reach out.
Yeah. And to what extent do you think it's important to be creating your own content in addition to, like, can you just be, as you said, can you just sort of like be interacting with other people's content and connecting with them, or do you also have to be creating your own content to get sort of the full effect, or like, to what extent are those strategies sort of tied together, or can they be, sort of, done separately?
Yeah, typically I recommend engaging with other people 5 to 10 times as much as you post content. So if you post, say, 3 posts a week, you should probably be engaging, 15 to, or more times other people. What did I say? 5 to 10? Sorry. Yeah. So I'm trying to do the math in my head. It's Friday afternoon when we're recording this, so apparently math is challenging for me. So 15 to 30 times with other people's content over the course of the week. And what that does is, it validates them. It's like when you post a selfie on Instagram, or a picture of your dog, or a picture of your kids, and people like that kind of validates, like, oh, everyone else thinks my dog is cute too, or this is a cute outfit I was wearing, something like that. Well, the same thing is with LinkedIn, but it kind of validates your brain or your thinking. So that goes a long way with people, especially when you're trying to build relationships with them. And so it doesn't seem like that much when you like someone's content, or you add a comment, or send them a private message. But I recommend doing those activities to stay top of mind with those folks, because as well as I do, if you connect with someone, say in 2016, and now it's 2022, and you reach out and say, hey, I kind of get a warm intro to X person. If you haven't talked to that person in 6 years, it's never going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Like, who are you? Why would I do this? But if you consistently engage with someone's content, you reach out maybe once a year to see how someone's doing. That goes a long way to keep that relationship alive. So that when you do want a warm introduction, or you do see that they have an open position, that someone that could potentially fill that, or if they have a pain point that your company could potentially solve, they're much more willing to listen to you and have that conversation.
There's been some work done on the decay curve of relationships, where the people have actually done some math on this, I guess, and I forget the exact numbers, but it's like it does decay off quite quickly. And so your ability to just even put those little touches in can make such a big difference about, how somebody interacts with you later on. Another maybe question on the interacting with somebody's content. So I lately am somebody that I do some posting, like we've been posting some of the hard sell episodes, or I've been on some podcasts where I've done some posts, but I haven't really written much in the way of content in some time, just your life and other things happening. And so is there a way, if you're trying to get to know somebody a little bit and interact with their content, is there a way to sort of to assess, oh, well, like they are actually in the comments and reading, or they're sort of a passive poster, and I might have to try to interact with them in some of this, sort of a way to try to, I guess, intuit the way that somebody else is using LinkedIn as a way to try to then figure out the best way to reach them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, if they're posting content and they say they get, 10, 15 comments, and they don't like or respond to any of them, to your point, they're a passive poster.
Yeah, that's probably.
And they might even be using like Hootsuite or Hearsay, or Seismic Live Social, one of those tools to post it, and then they never go to LinkedIn. They're just churning out content, and which is a gap, right? You and I both know, if you're posting this stuff, but you never follow up with these people, are you really getting any value from it? Probably not. And to answer your original question, I do recommend that you post content. It can be a mix of third party and first party. So I don't think anyone has to feel like they have to come up with something new and fresh every time they post. And a lot of financial services companies, my company works with a lot of FinServ companies, don't necessarily allow you to write your own content. It's got to be pre-approved or through some sort of repository that's pre-approved. So there's some sticky wickets there, of course, when you're creating your own, depending on what industry you're in. But as far as looking at how people are utilizing LinkedIn, if they have 100 connections, you can probably guess they're not super active on LinkedIn, and probably LinkedIn might not be the best way to reach out to them. Maybe Facebook would be the right way, or maybe email or a phone call, or the warm intro component might be the best way to talk to them. So you just have to look through their activity and engage. To your point, how are they using it, and how much are they using it, and figure out the best way to talk from there.
It's pulling on that a little bit. So let's say you identify somebody that, okay, well, like they're on LinkedIn sort of in name only, like it's going to be hard for me to reach this person. Are there what would you guess would be, other social channels where you might find people, or what are some of the ones that folks are having success with that are maybe emerging, or or ones that have been around for a while, but didn't work before, but maybe work now?
Yeah, I don't know if it's the best way from a business perspective to reach out, but typically people are more active on Twitter. So that might be an opportunity to reach out. Although those direct messages on Twitter hit a little bit differently than direct messages on LinkedIn. So you have to be careful when you reach out to folks.
But can you say more about that? Like how do they hit different?
Yeah. So from a LinkedIn perspective, private messaging is really the secret sauce. I mean, you're not going to start any business relationships and actually schedule meetings, for example, in the public forum. So a lot of times after you connect with someone, those private messages, and even reaching out to see how people are doing, that's typically used very similar to email. Twitter is a little bit different. Those direct messages aren't used quite as much. And so sometimes people use those, we'll say, in inappropriate ways on Twitter, much more so than LinkedIn. So a lot of people are wary of direct messages on Twitter. We'll even say, I don't look at direct messages. So that's a little more challenging. So in the public forum is a little more acceptable to have those conversations in Twitter. So that's an opportunity. You asked about emerging channels as well. TikTok, actually. I've seen a lot of companies utilizing that from, a self-help perspective, from a fitness perspective, sports, and even financial services companies are starting to jump into TikTok. I've seen Fidelity and BlackRock and some other companies start to post content on there. It's really around self-help, or even activating some influencers that already have a good following and partnering with them in a forum that's quick and easy, and can get some ideas and some helpful information out there in a new forum. So that's one that's is just growing so rapidly right now, and companies are trying to figure out how to use it as much as possible as a result.
There was a woman. I'm not a TikToker, but there was it's an article about a woman who does these Excel tutorials on TikTok. Is sort of like a lead gen motion, which she then gets people into these courses that she's built. And this is like incredibly wildly popular. Just built this massive business doing that one thing. So it's quite an interesting emerging channel. And is there a point at which if you're able to sort of get somebody's attention on any of these social channels, is there a point at which it makes sense to redirect the conversation to a more traditional medium, like asking for the meeting, or getting somebody's email address and starting a course? Like, is there a way to suss out when it's right to move it off of wherever you started talking to some other, maybe more durable long-term medium?
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to LinkedIn as an example. So what I typically recommend that people do is, when it gets past those scheduling conversations, you've met the person, you've had a couple conversations, you want to schedule either a meet and greet or an introductory phone call, whatever that may be. From that point onward, probably best to take it to the email. That said, it's really easy to get lost in the shuffle from an email perspective. I remember back when I was in corporate land before I started my own business, I used to get probably 500 emails a day. And so it was really easy for someone's email just to get lost in the shuffle or in the morning culling when I would just delete like 200 messages every morning.
Yeah.
Because most of them were spam. It's really easy just to get lost in there. So if someone's responding on LinkedIn, for example, on a consistent basis, you might want to stay on LinkedIn because that's the one that's really their medium of easier to develop than 500 emails.
Yeah. And what's maybe a related question? Do you have a point of view about text messaging and sort of communicating with somebody via text?
Yeah, I mean, I do with some of my clients, for example, but I know, again, I work with a lot of financial services companies. A lot of them aren't allowed to use text messaging for business purposes, which I know sounds crazy in 2022, but that's still the state of that industry. It's easy to cross over into personal activities and things like that, and lose that work-life balance from a text messaging perspective. But I think the expectation of most people is for you to be always on nowadays. Yeah. So it's a tough decision, who you let in to a text messaging conversation. I know some clients have had the only time I can get in touch with them is after hours via text. So it's just, I use it sparingly, but maybe once or twice a year, I'll reach out at, 7, 8 at night and ask, hey, you got 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So I think it's effective, but you have to be careful how you use it.
That's a good way. I think that's a good way to think about it, because I suppose there's certain channels that my sense is people are more sensitive to. Like, if you send me a bunch of in-mails, I probably don't get angry, but it's like, if all of a sudden you start bombarding me with texts, it's sort of like, well, no, that's a different realm, of sensitivity, if you will. So,
and is it just me? Whenever I get a spam text, like, oh man, that's just the worst.
Yeah.
So yeah, but to your point, if I were to get a spam email, it's just you ignore and you move on, or a spam email, you ignore and move on. But when you get a spam text, you just paid for that. Like, I had to pay to get that text. So yeah, it's not nearly as fun.
And I think that probably the countermeasures are getting a little bit better on the phones too, where it's like, it's so easy now to block and mark as spam, whether it's a phone call or a text message, that, not only do you risk sort of burning a bridge with that individual, but you may actually prevent yourself from getting further distribution down the line, which has always been true, or been true for a very long time in things like email. But some of these newer mediums, I think, where people are used to basically being able to spam at will, that seems to be seemingly changing, I think, probably for the better.
Yeah. And, I posted about this the other day. It's a good point, Joel, that like email, for example, like nowadays, if I get an email from someone and it's remotely interesting, the first thing I do is I look them up on LinkedIn to see if that person and that company come up on LinkedIn. And if I can't find either one of them, it's just deleted, and I'll never listen to that person or talk to them again. So it's table stakes to make sure that you've got presences on social media channels nowadays where your target audience will be looking for you. And if you don't, your competitors do. And so it really is table stakes to make sure that, say if you're a company, like I mentioned, I work with FinServe companies, you have to have a profile of your financial advisor. You just have to. It's not even a question. And even if it's a small firm, you just have a placeholder as a company page on LinkedIn, just to make sure that it looks like a legitimate organization, because just having that little logo in your profile instead of the little blank building with a gray background goes a long way to legitimizing your business, even if it's a 5-person business versus something that looks like it's something you run out of your garage.
Right. Maybe pull on that a little bit, and we'll probably wrap after this segment. But so we've talked a lot about how an individual can sort of use social channels to get in touch with folks and start to drive sales results. So what if let's say I'm a sales leader, and let's just say, maybe, I'm a sales leader that didn't really grow up with social media. It might be something that's a little bit more foreign that, either I don't use as much personally, or, I haven't used as much in a sales setting, but I recognize that it's important. And I've got a whole team of people that I need to they've got to know how to do this stuff, right? We have to have some sort of a corporate strategy or enablement around, like, what do you do in that case if you're sort of at like, we have no social media strategy, and or as an organization, as a selling organization, let's hold marketing aside for a minute, but as a
Sure.
selling organization, we have no social media strategy and we need to have one. Maybe just talk me through that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, the first part is around, legal and supervision, right? I mean, if depending on what industry you're in, you're going to need to make sure that they're comfortable with you creating some sort of a presence, whether it's individually or from the corporate perspective, on these channels, and putting infrastructure in place. If you want to say have a content repository, like we talked about a little bit earlier, if you need to capture and archive those activities, making sure you've got those things in place first and foremost, right? So you're not like the Hippocratic Oath, right? We're not doing any harm to the business. We want to make sure we've got that first. And then talk to your senior management about it, because you're going to need budget, right? Because it doesn't seem like it's that heavy of a spend, because it's all organic, right? You're just reaching out to people on LinkedIn or posting things on Facebook or tweeting. But you still need someone to create that content from a company perspective and curate that content. So there is a resource factor involved in that. And that's typically where it is on the, usually, so you're gonna need your partners in marketing, to help out, or communications. And then from a sales perspective, you're gonna need training, right? Teaching these folks the right way and the wrong way to do things at the organization, to make sure, again, they're not putting the company any risk. Most of the time, these sales reps will already be doing things on social media. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not good, those activities that they're doing. So you want to make sure you put those guardrails in place, say, okay, this is what we want you to do, this is what we don't want you to do in this role of the organization. So you've got your legal and compliance, you've got your infrastructure, you've got your technology, you've got your content, and then you got your training. I mean, those would be the steps. And I think in that order is probably the best way you want to go about it. But getting back to your original question, it all starts with strategy, right? Before you do any of that, what do we want to accomplish and where do we want to do it? If you're a B2C company, like if you're Taco Bell, they're targeting Gen Z and millennials predominantly. So they're going to be on Instagram, they're going to be on Snapchat, because that's where and TikTok, because that's where their target audience hangs out, right? If you're a large technology company that sells B2B, you're probably going to want to be on LinkedIn, because that's where your buyers are going to be. So it all depends, from a strategic perspective, where your audience is. So start with your objective and your target audience, figure out what those are, what does success look like, and then do that process that I mentioned with those different steps.
Yeah, and I know you've done a lot of this work with folks. Have you seen any sort of success stories come to mind, or folks that have sort of gone from a no or a bad strategy to a good one, and then them in turn then seeing better sales results?
Yeah, we've worked with a lot of companies that get a large boost in meetings, and many times that carries through at the same percentage to sales. Not always, but what I always say is, with the process that we do, we can always get you more meetings. From that point, it's up to you. I mean, your product might be a good fit, I should say, might not, for that organization, but we can get you in front of the right decision makers to have those conversations. And that's what social media does, is it accelerates the sales process in a lot of cases by being able to get around those 500 emails that I mentioned, or those 50 phone calls that those executives get every day that all go to voicemail, but they're never going to listen to those voicemails. It cuts through a lot of that to be able to get to those decision makers more directly and have those one-on-one conversations that lead to those meetings. And from there, it's really up to you. We've had companies get 20, 30, 40% boosts in meetings year over year by starting to employ a social media program for their sales team and their marketing team. So we've had a lot of great success stories as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we're talking about real numbers that are very impactful to results. So that's exciting to hear. Well, Robert, we're out of time for today, but if people want to get in touch or learn more about what you're doing at Assist You today, what's the best way for folks to do that?
Yeah,
I'm assuming LinkedIn.
Yeah, I was going to say, just look me up on LinkedIn. I spend probably an hour or two a day on there. So Robert Knop, last name Knop. If you Google my name, the first thing that's going to come up is my LinkedIn profile, and that's one of the reasons why I spend so much time there is because I want that to happen. LinkedIn has fantastic search engine optimization. So if you do a lot of work in your profile and you're good at a strong profile to allow people go to, you're going to be coming up #1 on search for your name. Imagine the power of that on Google. So that's what I'd recommend.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, thanks for your time today. I had fun, and we'll be in touch soon.
Great. Thanks, Joel. Take care.
Okay, bye.
All right. Bye.